How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Taped Podcast, the most abstract podcast in the world. We're your hosts, as always, myself, MickyT.
Me, Nostalgia.
And welcome back to another edition of the Worst to Best series. As always, we are never alone with any of these. And we are joined by a very special guest today, a friend of the cassette tape, a frequent viewer of our podcast and our streams, a mod in our streams, actually, and all around, just a pretty cool guy. Please welcome, I can't think of a username.
Woo!
Hello. Yes. Hi. Yes. Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming on,
Thank
dude.
you guys.
Welcome to
Thank
the
you very much for
broadcast.
having me.
Anytime.
Welcome to the most based podcast on the internet.
Let's go.
Hell yeah. And of course, Nostalgia, what are we
Yeah.
doing today?
We're gonna look at the discography of a pretty influential hip hop group. They go by the name A Tribe Called Quest, and they're pretty fucking dope.
Oh yeah. And yeah, with that, we have 6 albums that A Tribe Called Quest has blessed us with. We're going to cover everything that they've done from their debut album all the way up to their final album. And yeah, you want to just get right into it?
Fuck yeah.
Let's do it.
Fuck yeah. And with that, at the number 6 spot, in my opinion, the worst Tribe Called Quest album is The Love Movement.
And I agree.
I have beats, rhymes, and life.
Alright.
Wow.
Interesting.
We'll get to you in a few minutes. Alright, so, for the longest time, The Love Movement was A Tribe Called Quest's last album. That's no longer the case, but if it remained as Tribe's last album, then honestly, in my opinion, it probably would have been a lousy send-off for the group, because this was far and away their weakest album. It's not bad by any means, but in comparison to the rest of Tribe's discography, The Love Movement is just kind of insignificant, forgettable, and dull in comparison. If it needed another description, I would say just take a look at the album cover and then describe that to yourself. That's basically what the album sounds like to me. Things at the same time weren't exactly the most functionable for the group. I read that wrong. Sorry. things at the time weren't exactly functional for the group, and obviously a lot of their material was destroyed from a fire that happened at Q-Tip's studio home. And in that regard, it may be forgivable the way this record turned out, and I can let it slide. But even then, when there's loads of good moments, there's a lot of very just okay and drab tracks. It for sure has its great tracks and moments of production that work well and sound very enjoyable, but a lot of it just seems like wallpaper for Tribe. Like, its production palette is solid, but some of it sounds like kind of stock to me, and it doesn't really have the same vibrance that other Tribe albums have. I think the performances from everybody involved are decent, but nothing that's really out there or stands out. They just kind of sound like they're going with the flow, and that's fine, I guess. But I didn't really feel like it matched with the somewhat serviceable beats that the Uma were making on this. Like I said, there's some tracks on here that I think are great, but none of them really carry this album from being above average, in my opinion. And yep, that's about it. I haven't got much else to say about it.
Well, I'll start off by saying it kind of speaks to the testament of how consistent this group is, because I don't dislike this album in any capacity. I actually think it's quite solid. Despite the fact that it's their worst album, and honestly, personally, by a country mile, I still think it's an overall serviceable project and one with barely any bad moments. The project is technically a concept album with each track exploring the concept of love, but to be honest, that is the most vague quote-unquote concept of all time. And yeah, overall, I think this is just the group's most simple and uninteresting album, mainly production-wise. It again has a very, jazz-oriented production style, but with a lot more of that late 90s R&B flair on it. But it really seldom presents anything beyond just sort of surface level, safe and somewhat pleasant instrumentals. Nothing really, that sticks with you. Nothing that, honestly, right now, thinking back, I can recall production wise. It just is a little forgettable there. The performances from the boys, though, are, while certainly their least memorable, still very good. Standards in that department are just so high through and through that it's hard to truly get anything from them that isn't, at least solid.
Yeah.
And obviously it's no longer their swan song, and I think it would have been a bit of a dull sending off if it was. But nonetheless, I just think it's probably the least significant album in the band's discography, especially now that it isn't their swan song and it doesn't have that playing towards it. And yeah, it's the most, I guess, average album in a very above average discography.
Mhm. Now, as I get into this, I feel like it's worth prefacing. I think Tribe are one of the most consistent groups in the history of hip hop. They're one of my favorite bands, period. Like when we were first discussing the idea of me being on an episode of Worst to Best, they were the first people that came to mind for me. I think all of their projects are minimum good. That said, Beats, Rhymes, and Life is probably their least good. Like, for me, I think the thing you have to talk about if you're going to talk about this record at all is Consequence. As they started basically just falling apart at the seams after Midnight Marauders, they sort of just shoehorned him in there for whatever reason. Was that ever really like specified why he was brought in for that project?
I think it was because let's call it Fife Dog was kind of was kind of distanced from the group, especially when he moved away, and I think he wasn't getting along with Q-Tip that much at the time. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, that's probably it. Like I'm like that doesn't surprise me at all. Plus, he's Q-Tip's cousin, obviously got the family connection. I don't think Consequence is bad or a hindrance on the record or in any way, even if he's really not quite on Q and Fife's level. But I think his sudden burst in as this sort of quasi member of Tribe is pretty indicative of where they were at. Like, if you listen, everybody just sounds tired. I think this is their most dysfunctional record overall. Like, Fife specifically just sounds done. On, what is it, Jam, when he says, I'm feeling jaded, like, it sounds like it.
Hmm.
Yeah. That said, there is still plenty of good. I really dig the sort of darker atmosphere compared to the rest of their work. Q and Fife are still obviously elite rappers. I would say Get a Hold specifically is one of their best of that stage of their career. I do love a couple of the callbacks as they come up on this record, like the one interpolation of Check the Rhyme. I can't, on Once Again, that's right.
Mm.
And how the pressure samples a bunch of their own work is super interesting. But outside of that, not a lot that really stands up to their very best. And I will say this, one of the only Tribe songs I really don't like is probably the opener Phony Rappers. It just seems really salty, I guess. I don't really see why they needed to come on so hard like that. Like, I get it. I get their position on rap as they work in it, but it just seems like needless punching down to me.
Mm.
All right.
I see. Huh.
All right, is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And with that in mind, my favorite tracks from the Love Movement are Find a Way, Like It Like That, and Four Moms. My least favorite track is Start It Up.
My favorite track is Find a Way. My least favorite track is The Booty.
Favorite tracks on Beats, Rhymes, and Life are Jam, The Pressure, and Once Again. Least favorites are Phony Rappers and The Hop.
Okay, we're moving on to our number 5 picks, and I chose Beats, Rhymes, and Life.
I also chose Beats, Rhymes, and Life.
This might give me some shit. I chose People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm.
Ooh, wow. Didn't expect you to put the Love Movement over that. Wow.
I'll say my piece on the Love Movement when we get there.
Okay. So yeah, I'll start by saying that you shouldn't let my ranking fool you, because even though I have Beats, Rhymes, and Life ranked this low on my list, I still think that it's a very good album from the group. Most Tribe albums are good at the very least, which just speaks to the quality of their work. Beats, Rhymes, and Life just happens to be one that I feel like is not as great as some of Tribe's other albums, but it's still good for me. Granted, it isn't perfect. I think that the production, while still very, very good across the album, isn't as impressive as it was on other Tribe records, and some tracks have a tendency to just kind of blend in and not really stand out as much. But aside from that, I have no other complaints because Tribe still made a good record out of the material that's on here. Production on this album was very much in that jazz rap and boom bap vibe that we expect to hear from Tribe. It was handled by the UMA, which was a production group that consisted of Ali, Q-Tip, and the late great Jay Dilla, and they provide some very good beats on this thing. Some of them even take slight influences from 90s R&B and have kind of a darker atmosphere. And for the most part, I think these new ideas kind of culminate well into Tribe sound. But it does kind of blend in together, like I mentioned. In terms of the rapping, I think that everyone is pretty solid on here. Q-Tip sounds pretty good. Obviously, Fife was a bit lacking in some areas, but I think he sounded good. And, a lot of people like to kind of critique like Consequences appearances on the album, but honestly, I think he does a good job of what he's given. I will agree, it does kind of seem like he's kind of being put there forcefully in a sense to the listener, but I still think that he provides he does decent, I think, at least. The lyrics kind of deviate from what Tribe talked about previously, but the flows remain slick and they each sound very good over these tracks. There's a bunch of really great tracks in here, but back to the point that I was making earlier, some tracks just blend in. There is a fair amount of them that don't really stand out and kind of do that, but those tracks that I like I think are still very good. I wouldn't be opposed to throwing this album on, but whenever I'm in the mood for Tribe. But I think that I will more than likely just throw on something else, like maybe the Low End Theory or Midnight Marauders. So yeah, I don't have much else to say about Beats, Rhymes, and Life. It doesn't actually leave a lot of room to talk about since it doesn't hugely stand out in Tribe's discography. But once again, it's a good album to turn on, and I wouldn't be opposed to listening to it again if need be.
Yeah, well, again, for me, despite my ranking, don't get fooled into thinking that I don't really like this album, because honestly, I do think this project is quite good. I do think it's a turn in a more kind of raw, aggressive, and in-your-face direction for A Tribe Called Quest. And it really does, present a lot of memorable moments. In a lot of ways, the production here is, kind of similar in composition to what was present on their previous two albums. Bass lines kind of just take center stage. The beats are punchy and at times unforgiving, way more so than anything they did on previously. I think the beats and the instrumentals here just are a lot, as I said, a lot more in your face, a lot more immediate, and it's an interesting turn. The sampling here also is a little less subtle, yet equally as important to the album's success as it was on previous records. But what ultimately brings this album down for me is, I think, just a lack of truly incredible and like masterpiece worthy moments. It delivers a lot of good material, but I can't really think of many tracks that would stand amongst the group's best. And that in turn makes it just overall feel a lot less essential, and yeah, just a lot less memorable when you're looking at the grand scheme of A Tribe Called Quest. But yeah, as I said, I do still think it has some brilliant moments. Tracks like Once Again and Stressed Out are fantastic, yet at the same time they just don't really hold a candle to the group's best material. I just don't think this album is as focused. I don't think the execution is as seamless, and I don't think it has that wow factor overall. But I do think this album is somewhat overlooked. I still think it should be held in pretty high regard. And yeah, at the same time, it just is also clear that the group aren't really reaching their peaks at any point on this project.
So, for me, with People's Instinctive Travels, I understand this is one that people do hold in very high regard, and don't get me wrong, it's good, it's great, even. It's also too goddamn long. Like, I know in the grand scheme, 64 minutes isn't too bad for an album, but I think as it goes on, the record does start to drag just that little bit. Like, at the end of the day, it's still Tribe. I'm still going to enjoy it. But that sort of makes a good segue to my other issue with this project is that the lack of Fife Dog severely hurts this project for me. In moments, it really does kind of feel like a Q-Tip solo project, featuring Jerobi and Fife at varying moments. And also, this is a very hyper-specific note to me, but I just don't want to hear a song about crabs, you know? I just don't, man. I don't want to hear it.
Man, he's telling
And
you to be
also,
healthy.
I mean, I get it and I respect it, but it's still just fucking gross. And I
Uh,
don't that.
yeah, I get you. I get you.
And I think youthful expression's a bit on the longish side too. That out of the way, as I said, good lord, can you tell I'm a little nervous? There is still a lot of great stuff here. Q-Tip, for as much of this record as he does take up, I still really don't have a problem with it at the end of the day, because from day one, he was one of the GOATs. Elite storyteller, masterful MC. I Left My Wallet at El Segundo is one of the best storytelling rap songs of that era to me. It's genuinely super funny and never fails to make me smile. It's also super interesting to me to hear them like before they got super ingrained in the jazz rap stuff they're known for. Like the variety in the beats kind of surprised me on a re-listen, and honestly for 90, it holds up really well to me. Like I even put in my notes here that I think the beat on Mr. Muhammad wouldn't even sound out of place on like a modern conscious hip hop album. All my smaller nitpicks to the side. People's Instinctive Travel is still a fantastic record. And one last note as far as individual tracks go. The first time I heard this, I really could not get into Ham and Eggs. Re listening to it for this, I finally fell in love with that song because it's just so damn fun. Like that hook has been stuck in my head since I first heard it again. I love it.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's it. Great record, just a little too long.
Okay. And
Fair.
with that in mind, my favorite tracks from Beats, Rhymes, and Life are Get a Hold, The Jam, and Once Again. My least favorite track is What Really Goes On.
My favorite tracks are Get a Hold, Once Again, and Stressed Out. My least favorite track is Baby Five's Return.
Favorite tracks on People's Instinctive are Footprints, After Hours, Can I Kick It, and Ham and Eggs. Least favorites are Pubic Enemy and Youthful Expression.
Pubic
Enemy, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I would have left that one in the drafts tip. Sorry. All right, so we're moving on to our number 4 picks, and I chose People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm.
This feels wrong, but trust me, I love this project. Midnight Marauders.
Oh, ooh. Wow.
Oh. And I have the Love Movement.
All right, then, it's a variety.
One, like, somewhat, unpopular opinion just makes this worst to best look scuffed.
Oh, it's even worse. Midnight Marauders in the bottom half of the list.
I mean, is it really in the bottom half? It's 4th.
I thought I felt dirty putting Love Movement over People's Instinctive Travels. Jesus.
Oh my. It's a fucking doozy. I feel like I'm the only sane person here. Hot damn. Hey. Anyways. Yeah. Tribe's debut may not be one of my personal favorite albums in their discography, which at this point isn't saying much because Tribe have plenty of great albums under their name. But with that being said, it's a really great and incredibly impressive debut for the group. As well as that, it also happens to be one of the major kind of pioneering albums in the jazz rap movement, especially at the time that it came out. It wasn't the very first jazz rap album to come out, obviously, but it was one of the earliest. And, out of a lot of those artists, like, say that again. But it was one of the earliest, and out of a lot of those, like, early artists, like the other groups in Native Tongues, KMD, Gangstar, and a few others, Tribe were making some of the best music that scene had to offer, and a lot of that amazing music is all over People's Instinctive Travels. I do think that Tribe were only able to get better with some of the records that follow after their debut, but that's no slight to the debut, as I think it's a great album on its own, and people could only dream of having a debut that hits the mark like Tribe's. Out of the gate, Tribe already had established themselves with their own unique sound, and they craft it in a way that's both catchy and subtly nuanced, especially with their instrumentals, which are often just incredible across this thing. Ollie's production across this album is just stellar. The beats on this album are so mellow, jazzy, and psychedelic, yet they have catchiness and punch to them. Those elements coexist in the best ways here, and there isn't a moment where anything feels kind of dull or awkward. It's just refreshing and really vibrant. I love the eclectic samples across this album. The boom bap drums are great, and they provide great space and backdrop for Q-Tip to do his thing over. Speaking of Q-Tip, he's the main rapper all over this album, and he does a very good job all over this album. And I agree with I Can't Think of a Username. The fucking GOAT from day one absolutely kills it on a lot of levels. He provides some just simple verses with kind of Afrocentric lyrics that come off very down to earth, but he does that with a great flow that sounds so natural and smooth. Plus, there's some storytelling thrown in there with like Left My Wallet and El Segundo. Plus, some of the hooks he provides are insanely catchy. Like, come on, Benia Applebum has been stuck in my head for fucking weeks. With all that in mind, Tip and Ollie just make fun track after fun track after fun track, and some of them turn out to be some of Tribe's best songs, both deep cuts and hit songs. If there were some nitpicks I would have about the album, I do wish that Fife and Jerobi were more present on this album. In that sense, it kind of makes Tribe not feel fully formed, and I don't think it takes away from the quality that they display, and whenever Fife has a verse, it's very good. But, obviously their presence, I feel like if you were going to show someone Tribe Called Quest, I think you would direct them more to Midnight Marauders or even the Low End Theory, because that feels like Tribe is complete at that point. Another thing is that there are a couple of tracks in the second half that are decent but not as good as the rest of the record. It can be a bit filler, in my opinion, especially given how long the album is. And aside from all that, Tribe's debut is fantastic, and it really says something when a record is fourth in my ranking and it's fantastic.
Yep, I agree. Again, the ranking may suggest that I'm not really too hot on this project, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I fucking love Midnight Marauders. But to me, for me personally, and I understand most people would disagree, but just personally, it brings a little less to the table than the 3 albums I've ranked above it. Don't get me wrong, it's really, really consistent. It's got some absolutely incredible moments, and it, again, checks pretty much every box for me. Yet at the same time, its direction, its sound palette, its atmosphere, and just the overall vibe, everything about this album just to me kind of is comparable to the material on the Low End Theory, which obviously isn't a bad thing in of itself, but it really just feels like, to me, the Low End Theory Part 2. It feels, but the crucial thing for me is that I do think that the Low End Theory does pretty much everything a little bit better. That of course does not detract from the incredible, tracks all over Midnight Marauders. Steve Biko Award Tour, obviously, Electric Relaxation. There's just so many moments on here that absolutely blow me away every single time. And the album manages to bring forward these moments without delivering a single dud, as far as I'm concerned. As a whole, the listening experience I get from this album is just through and through very consistent, incredibly enjoyable. But despite its being a fantastic album with brilliant production, iconic performances, ultimately there are just 3 albums that click with me a little bit more than this project does. And those 3 albums are ones that I see myself coming back to more often than this project. And ultimately, the gaps in between albums were pretty narrow for me, and that's what sealed the deal for me.
Pain.
Man. So, the Love Movement is kind of a funky one for me. I was first prompted to check out Tribe after watching Mike the Snare's Deep Discog Dive. And I remember going into it expecting to think it was Midtown USA, but came out loving it. And I haven't heard it in full until I went to do the re-listens for this. And I figured once I heard it again, it would kind of wear off the sort of shock of it being way better than I expected. But I still think this record holds up a lot, at least for me. I definitely get what y'all were saying about it being a little boring or tame, but I think that more laid back nature is why it clicks with me so much. It's definitely a little bit low energy from both Q and Fife, but I do think that makes for some pretty interesting performances from them, even if they sound pretty uninterested themselves. I'm a sucker for very low key, vibey beats, and the Uma provided that in spades. I know Nostalgia said he's not huge on Djibouti. I am. It's very, very silly, but I love it. Um,
How can
his
anyone
name is
hate the
Muddy
booty?
Ranks bumps as well. I think that song should have been at least twice as long because solo Fife just goes insane with
Yeah,
no
that song.
exceptions.
Yeah, that song goes off. I won't even lie.
Yeah. And the thing I think nobody really talks about with this record is the features are nuts. Like Busta Rhymes and Redman on Steppin' Up are the reason that song is like maybe a top 5 Tribe track for me. Like they go off. Noriaga on Give Me is great. Everybody on Rock Rock Y'all brings it, especially Mos Def because of course he does. He's most fucking deaf. Jane Doe's verse on that is really underrated though. I will say that high key, she kind of hits some for free type flows on that, and they're rad. The one blemish on this for me is Hot for You. I think as far as Tribe's girl songs go, that one is definitely pretty low on the totem pole. But other than that, I think this record bumps. It's super underrated, and I understand why people are bored by it, but I think that sort of vibe everybody gets from it is why I fuck with it so much. It's a super, super big outlier for them, I guess. And that's what makes it so interesting for me.
All right. And with that, my favorite tracks from People's Instinctive Travels are I Left My Wallet in El Segundo, Benita Applebum, and Can I Kick It? My least favorite track is Ham and Eggs.
My favorite tracks
And
on Midnight Marauders are Steve Biko, Award Tour, and Electric Relaxation, and I don't have any least favorite tracks. I mean it. I like this album.
You're just saying that now just so you can get less
Please
shit.
believe me.
Don't believe
um,
him.
favorite tracks on the Love Movement were Djibouti, Steppin' It Up, Busta's Layman, and Rock Rock Y'all. Least favorite was Hot for You. I see your ham and eggs hate, Mick, and it brings me
I
great pain.
I I don't hate it. I just don't really click with it.
Oh well.
Ah well. Anyways, we're in the top 3 now, and for me, Tribe Called Quest's third best album is Midnight Marauders.
My number 3 is We Got It From Here. Thank you for your service.
My number 3 is also Midnight Marauders.
I'll go last, so.
All right. We're part of the base squad. Here we go. Anyways, at this point in time, Midnight Marauders was another record that continued the group's streak of great records, and while Midnight Marauders came out during a time when the rap world was shifting on both the East and the West Coast respectively, it feels like a staple record for when it came out, and to this day it acts as another showing of why A Tribe Called Quest were such an essential and incredible group, because Midnight Marauders is just fantastic. You know, Midnight Marauders is not exactly changing up much for A Tribe Called Quest sound, since it's still heavily leaning into that conscious Afrocentric jazz rap that we know and love Tribe for. It sounds closer to their debut sonically in my opinion, but I feel like it's more representative of the group than the debut, and when it comes down to the production and the rapping, it's easily one of the group's best. It wouldn't be my personal favorite Tribe record, obviously, but I still think that it offers a lot of value to Tribe's discography. And all in all, it's one of their most fun and enjoyable albums. Plus, it also has some of their best tracks. You know, production-wise, the group continued to make some slick, groovy, mellow, and jazzy beats that feature plenty of great samples, great drums, great grooves. Skef Anselm and Large Professor get to provide some beats for the group as well, and they all sound amazing. There isn't a single weak instrumental on this album, and I mean that. Tribe's production rarely falters, with plenty of their greatest beats being present on here. I love so many of the sample choices, and the punchiness of the drums really adds a ton to the tracks themselves. I'd argue they're somewhat more punchy than they are on the low end theory. Um, Q-Tip and Fife once again do a fantastic job on the rapping end of things. And I must say, Fife especially absolutely killed it on every track he was on. And I think his best verses and performances ever are on Midnight Marauders. And he only improves on what he did on the low end theory and People's Instinctive Travels. Q-Tip, of course, does a fantastic job too. He sounds slick as ever on Midnight Marauders, and once again, those kind of simplistic Afrocentric lyrics are pretty good a lot of the time. And both Fife and Q-Tip continue to show personality on their rhymes. Some absolutely amazing Tribe songs appear in this thing. Some of the best tracks that they've ever made, even, and it's another one of the group's more consistent releases, given the quality of each track on here. Personally, I don't think some tracks are as memorable as others, but that is a rare occurrence for me because I think there's plenty of memorable and fantastic moments to behold. So yeah, Midnight Marauders is another fantastic Tribe album. It's in fact one of their strongest albums in my opinion, and with that, I guess they just keep doing what they do best, stuck to their sound, and did it strongly on here.
You can go next.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything you just said rings true for me. Midnight Marauders is one that, going back to it, I realized I really kind of underrated. Not to say I didn't think it was great, but I definitely, definitely see it as on par with my top two at this point. Actually, added it to my topster right after re-listening to it. It is Tribe at its purest, I think, is the best way to put it. They just locked in and made that sweet, beautiful, jazzy goodness they are known best for. And like you said, Fife Dog is absolutely on fire on this. Like, on Low End Theory, he's great. He's fantastic. But I think it's with this album that people started to realize just how good he is. I think 8 Million Stories alone is proof of that.
Yes.
And I think part of what makes him such a good partner in rhyme, if you will, to Q-Tip is just how distinct they are compared to one another. Like, you have Q-Tip, this sort of reserved, almost intellectual type, and you have this boisterous Trinidadian gladiator busting out a million sports references a minute. It's just, he is absolutely relentless in comparison to Q-Tip's more relaxed, easygoing flows. And those two characters intertwine so perfectly on all of their material, especially here.
You could say
And
Fife was on point.
all the time,
All
Nick.
the time.
All the time, too.
And also, as if it needs to be said, production impeccable. I do like how, at least to me, it manages to be both a direct continuation of the sounds and ideas presented on the low end theory, while also managing to still stand on its own. Records very similar in sound to me often suffer from what I call the room on fire effect, where, and not shitting on Room on Fire, that album is very, very good, but when two records sound so similar and are so intrinsically linked, I think one has a habit of living in the shadow of the other. And while that is a tiny bit true for Midnight Marauders, I do think people are able to recognize just how fantastic it is, completely removed from the context of the low end theory. And also, I don't know what it is, but that weird robot lady that keeps coming in for the outros somehow adds so much to it for me. I love her, and I'm glad she exists. And on just a smaller note, We Can Get Down's breakdown towards the end is absolutely fucking insane, and more people should talk about that because, damn.
Yeah, We Can Get Down is fucking unreal, especially that kind of breakdown towards the end. Holy.
For sure. And yeah, Midnight Marauders, good, great, excellent. And I'm glad I have an increased appreciation for it now that I've come back to it.
Also, back to what you were saying about the robot lady. I think Logic likes A Tribe Called Quest.
Maybe just a little bit. Just a little.
Maybe.
My number 3 pick was We Got Her From Here. Thank You for Your Service. The group's most recent album, Service. Following a nearly 20-year long absence of albums, 2016 saw the Tribe reassemble, at least partially. Ali Shaheed Muhammad was actually, I think, producing the Luke Cage soundtrack, if I'm correct.
He was.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so he was absent during this album's recording process. However, as I'm sure a lot of people know, the things kind of took a turn for the worse when Five Dog unfortunately passed away. However, not before recording a lot of material with Tip and Jerobi, the former of which managed to finish the album in his home studio. And the final project is quite simply brilliant. In my opinion, the group were, very clearly on a bit of a downward trend by the time their previous album, The Love Movement, was released. But the nearly 2-decade-long hiatus, I think, really meant the return to the studio was filled with just a fresh perspective, 20 years worth of just pent-up creativity, and more importantly, a point to prove. And the point they did prove is that Tribe Called Quest will always deliver, no matter how long the wait is.
Fuck yes.
This album really stands out from pretty much all of their past releases. It's grittier, it's grimier, the sampling and production is far more psychedelic and melancholic than anything they've released prior, and the overall sound palette of this project seems, to me at least, to take a lot of influence from the underground hip-hop scene that had, thrived since the band's previous project had been released. The group shy away from absolutely nothing with their hard-hitting political bars. The chemistry between Fife and Q-Tip is just as incredible as it had always been. And there's just seldom a dull moment throughout, as the band really make an effort to, make everything on this project sound fresh, sound new, and really express themselves creatively far more than they did on their 2 previous records. It's a brilliant project. It's filled with undeniable highlights. And in my opinion, it's a perfect swan song to one of the most important rap groups in history, R.I.P. Five Dog.
R.I.P.
Absolutely. Something I learned in the days before we did this is that, according to Big Boy, before Fife passed, there were talks about a Tribe Outcast joint project. It's like, can you imagine, man?
I'm not sure if that would even come to fruition, really, because everything that's been said about Andre 3000's like writer's block and stuff like that,
Yeah. But just the idea of it is insane to me.
The idea is incredible. I would kill for something like that to have ever happened,
Absolutely, man.
Unfortunately, it cannot, though, and it sucks. And with that in mind, my favorite tracks from Midnight Marauders are 8 Million Stories, Electric Relaxation, and Lyrics to Go. Lyrics to Go is so fucking hype. If I had to pick a least favorite track, I'd personally go with Midnight.
My favorites were 8 Million Stories, We Can Get Down, Electric Relaxation, The Chase Part 2. Least favorite was, I guess, Midnight Marauders Tour Guide. I know it's just an intro, but it's the best I can do.
I mean, you don't have to pick one. Like,
I know.
Best worst albums,
To be funny, I guess.
Just to be a little bit funny.
Bit cheeky, mate.
wee bit fucking cheeky. Did you say yours is nostalgia?
Oh, yeah. My favorite tracks are We the People, Whatever Will Be, and Conrad Tokyo. My least favorite track is Kids.
Alright, we're moving on to the second picks. The second best A Tribe Called Quest album. And yeah, for me, that is We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service.
My number 2 pick is People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm.
My number 2 pick is The Low End Theory.
I knew there'd be someone. I knew one of you would.
I gotta be that guy. I'm sorry.
Oh, you gotta be that guy. You're two people that does that. Oh. Shoutouts to Philip. Anyways, for the longest time, no one ever really expected that A Tribe Called Quest would ever make another album after the Love Movement and after Tribe's breakup. But I suppose you should never really say never, because Tribe did get back together, minus Ali, and they did record a new album. Unfortunately, during the recording, Phife Dawg died. Rest in peace, Phife, as always. But thankfully, whatever he had recorded made it to the final album, and it eventually came out in 2016 as a double album. And this was an extraordinary comeback album, to say the least. There's always a question mark about comeback albums, because historically, a lot of them haven't been really that great. But Tribe throw that narrative to the side and made quite possibly the greatest comeback album of all time. Given the circumstances, this is obviously the final Tribe album, but it is an amazing send-off to Tribe's legacy, and I think it is absolutely one of their best albums. This album pretty much holds on to a lot of what made A Tribe Called Quest great, but this time it takes what they did and brings it into a more modern sound with production that is cinematic and fantastic, and with rapping that's familiar to Tribe but also fresh and modernized. Tribe never skipped a beat when it came to whatever they did on this album, and they took a chance to retain their signature ideas while also expanding on them as well, with hints of neo-psychedelia and extra instrumentation and kind of a grander presentation. And there's even some, stellar guitar work on the back end, courtesy of the one and only Jack White of the White Stripes. And he's not the only bit of personnel that appears on this damn album, because there's so many faces on here. Some that return to Tribe, like Consequence and Busta Rhymes. Jerobi White returned to the group for the first time since the 90s, laid down some of his verses since then, and he fucking killed it. I shit you not. Jerobi needs more love for what he did on this album, because he was fantastic, honestly. But there's so many artists who appear too, like Kendrick Lamar, Andre 3000, Talib Kweli, Anderson .Paak, Kanye West, and even fucking Elton John was on this thing. And they all contributed so well to this album, respectively. None of them feel out of place. And these select features and artists make this like a celebration of Tribe's legacy. And even then, the music itself is just amazing. The production on We Got It From Here is just amazing. It's so crisp. It does so much to keep Tribe's sound while also expanding on it. And there's absolutely zero things that I can complain about when it comes to the production. It's just that fantastic, and it's amazing how Tribe were able to modernize but also maintain what made themselves so great. Of course, Q-Tip, Phife, and Jerobi killed it on this album. Jerobi especially should get his flowers more for how fantastic he was in this album. Q-Tip was great all over this thing as well, and whenever Phife Dawg was on this thing, he was also great. Everyone is really performing to the standard that I would love them to be performing at, and it helps that the pure political content of this album is written so potently and passionately. And the tributes to Phife Dawg were also really nice. As a fan of Tribe, like obviously seeing the way they basically made room for Phife to be sent off was just incredible. All in all, I think We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service is one of, if not the greatest comeback record of all time. It's an absolutely amazing send-off for hip-hop legends. The production is amazing. It does so much new while also being familiar for Tribe. The performances are incredible. The messages that it's trying to deliver are powerful. And once again, R.I.P. Phife.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Phife, man.
Now. My number 2 pick is the band's debut, People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm. And in my opinion, it's by far the group's most playful project, and one that set a brilliant foundation for the group to build upon, and also it established their signature charm and charisma. Yet, despite its playfulness and overall very laid-back nature, it never feels insincere or like it's not taking itself, serious at all. Instead, the playfulness just kind of adds to the effortlessness of the album and of the group's braggadocious and often entertaining rhymes. And it also adds to the very laid-back, at times almost like even psychedelic approach. In my opinion, it's got some of the group's best tracks of all time. Push It Along is a top 5 song of theirs for me, and one that just gets overlooked far too much. Can I Kick It? obviously the highlight here, and a
Yes, you
song that
can.
deserves yeah, it deserves every fiber of its popularity. But there's other highlights throughout. Luck of Lucian. I left my wallet in El Segundo and the iconic Bonita Applebum. It's just filled with bangers. It's a good time from start to finish. I do understand it's not an album that's going to crack most people's top three, and I can understand that. But for me, I've always just been absolutely infatuated with its charm, its atmosphere, its playfulness. Everything about this project speaks to me. I think right from the gates, the group had a purpose, and the group had an idea and direction, and they, I think, executed it here fantastically. So yeah, here's my nostalgia unpopular opinion for the day. I prefer People's Instinctive Travels over Midnight Marauders, and We Got It From Here. You can
What
have
you
that one
say,
for
Hammer?
free.
That line is so out of pocket. I love it so much. So, The Low End Theory is a perfect album. I'm just going to say that off the bat. It is a certified Stone Cold classic. Phenomenal performances front to back. Some of the most iconic beats of all time. For being so largely absent on People's Instinctive Travels, Phife Dawg more than makes up for lost time. He is absolutely killing it. Um, it really doesn't need to be said at this point that Q-Tip is an absolute master. Something I do think that gets kind of lost with Tribe, and I understand this doesn't quite translate to the recorded stuff so much, but Ali Shaheed Muhammad is quite possibly the greatest DJ that has ever lived. Absolute legend. As far as individual tracks go, Excursions is, I think, probably their best opener overall. Everything is Fair is a super duper underrated track to me. And for as awful as this title is, and boy am I gonna hate saying it out loud, the infamous Date Rape is a surprisingly progressive track for what it's about. There's still some bars that have obviously not aged well at all, but for the most part, it shows that those guys were leaps and bounds ahead of some of their contemporaries as far as certain social issues go. And obviously, you have Bugging Out, Show Business, Scenario, Check the Fucking Rhyme, obviously, just hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. It is an absolute classic, one of my favorite records ever made, and a perfect encapsulation of what made Tribe so special.
All right. And with that, moving on to best and worst tracks, I've decided to pick three from each disc of the album. So for me, my favorite tracks from We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service from disc 1 are The Space Program, We the People, and Disgeneration. On disc 2, it's Mobius, The Killing Season, and The Donald. My least favorite track is none of them.
My favorite tracks on the band's debut are Push It Along, Can I Kick It, and Description of a Fool. My least favorite track, I'm sorry, is Ham and Eggs.
Man. Favorite tracks on Low End Theory are Bugging Out, Show Business, Check the Rhyme, and Scenario. I have no least favorites.
And with that, we're on to our number 1 picks. And if it wasn't obvious for me, my favorite A Tribe Called Quest album, what I think is their best album, is The Low End Theory.
And I agree.
Get in.
And I have to be that guy. I'm sorry, but my favorite Tribe album is We Got It From Here. Thank You For Your Service.
Understandable, though.
Shouts to you, Phil.
Big shout outs to Big Phil. So yeah, without a single doubt in my mind, I think that The Low End Theory is A Tribe Called Quest's best album. Who would have guessed this would be my favorite Tribe album? I mean, it's for a good reason, really. Outside of it being the first actual A Tribe Called Quest album that I ever heard, this album is just so stellar from front to back. It's far and away one of the most entertaining hip-hop albums of the 90s, and it's also, to me, the quintessential A Tribe Called Quest album and the quintessential jazz rap album. I think what the Low End Theory does is represent all the best qualities of A Tribe Called Quest, from production to rapping. I think it's A Tribe Called Quest's strongest album in that regard, and it's just consistently quality from front to back, with back-to-back fantastic tracks that are easily among some of the group's absolute best songs. The signature sound that A Tribe Called Quest made themselves stand out with on their debut is all across this album, but Q-Tip, Fife, and Ollie improved what Tribe did on their debut with even better production, but they also made their sound even more in tune with those jazz influences. So much so that they lace a lot of samples, drums, and bass to sound traditionally jazz-like, but pure hip-hop at the same time. It has this minimalist sound that's deceptively layered and intricate, but across the board, it's just fantastic sounding. It barely sounds like it's aged a day production-wise. It's really impressive based on what Tribe were able to produce from these samples. All the main minimal elements that we see in the production are engineered and produced to near perfection. The drum samples genuinely sound like live drums the way they're produced here and engineered here. Then they are crisp as all fuck. God damn. The double bass is so fat in this thing too, and there's so many great bass lines all over this thing. Fun fact, jazz bassist Ron Carter provided bass for the verses from the Abstract song, which, it's pretty fucking epic, if I do say so myself. Also the reason why you don't see them cussing on this album too. And the samples utilized on this thing sound great. They maintain that psychedelic mellowness that we love from Tribe's production. There's too many standout beats to mention. Let's move over to the rapping, which is some of the best in Tribe's discography. Q-Tip and Fife are at their best on the Low End Theory. Q-Tip sounds just as confident and as smooth as we normally expect him to, and we get some excellent performances from Fife, who became a lot more present on this album than their debut. Obviously, I think his moment was bugging out. That song really showed Fife what he was made of. Goddamn, he popped off on that song. 8 Million Stories is up there. Well, come on, Bugging Out has to be the one for me.
Bugging Out's untouchable, man.
Yes. Lyrically, Tribe are just so good on this album. They have moments of seriousness when taking aim at the industry and consumerism, but they also have moments where they're kind of more in their fun lane, not being too serious. They also address a lot of social issues. And not to mention, there's plenty of great guest verses as well. For me, some of the absolute best songs that A Tribe Called Quest ever made appear in this album. Some of my favorites as well from them. Actually, my favorite A Tribe Called Quest song is on this, which I will note in my best and worst tracks. And the album itself is just very consistent. There's rarely a moment where it falters, and it is aged amazingly. Its production and rapping is just some of the best of its time. Sonically, it's aged amazingly. And I think the group on this was what the group did on this was truly monumental for hip-hop. So, yeah, the Low End Theory is a fucking banger.
Banger.
Yeah, for me, this was perhaps one of the easiest decisions I've ever had to make when it comes to the number one spot on a worst to best. Obviously not to diminish from any other projects, but the Low End Theory is one of the greatest rap albums of all time in my eyes. In fact, there's only probably around 2 or 3 albums that I would place above it in that ranking. It just showcases the very essence of every single thing that makes A Tribe Called Quest special. The instrumentals are just pure jazz rap perfection, subtle and minimalist in its structure, yet very grandiose in its atmosphere. The bass throughout is just butter smooth. The drum production, like you said, sounds so live, despite the fact that it's all programmed. And the bebop and hard bop samples are hand-picked and intertwined within the instrumentals perfectly. The mixing as well is quite groundbreaking, unlike a lot of, early hip-hop samples, which, the songs were kind of based on a single repeating sample. A Tribe Called Quest used just a plethora of samples from all sorts of different places to create entirely new compositions from the ground up. And, it really is just crafted masterfully. I have to reiterate just how perfect the production on this project is. I briefly mentioned the atmosphere, but again, I must elaborate on how special that is. Despite the album's, kind of minimalist atmospheres, they're just so damn spacious and hypnotic, and it immediately just reels me in. I said leer instead of reel. It immediately just reels me in every time I turn this album on. I'm just entranced by this project's atmosphere. All the boys are just on absolute top form. Fife Dog, as much as I love their debut, I do agree that he did, he didn't really shine on the same level as Q-Tip did until this project. But my God, does he shine. Q-Tip, he's got one of my favorite flows in hip hop, if not my favorite flow, and it's just utilized perfectly throughout. It's such a good project. The production and the instrumentation is just some of the most slickest, most charismatic, and just exciting, and honestly just meditative in hip hop history. The social commentary and the conscious bars are just hard hitting. It's just so fun, even aside from all those hard hitting bars. It's got everything I could ever look for in a hip hop project. It's a landmark album in music and hip hop history. It's an absolute masterpiece, and it's an album I really can't fault.
Also, can I just make a quick point here? Q-Tip is one of the most underrated producers and engineers out there. Dude fucking produced
Absolutely.
Dude fucking produced a lot of Tribe stuff. He produced a few tracks from the fucking Infamous from Mobb Deep. He produced on Illmatic. Dude's a fucking underrated sample, like a crate digger, dude. He's fucking awesome in that regard.
Underrated job, I think he did. I believe he produced a couple tracks for You Know What I'm Saying too, right?
He did. He produced a few tracks from that as well. Fucking love that album still.
Can't go wrong with little Danny Brown. But alas, the worst to best we are doing. Now, We Got It From Here, to me, is the embodiment of hip hop music. It is everything that made Tribe great for the entirety of the 90s, hammered down and brought back to life with just the right amount of new flavor thrown in to make it, to me, not just their best album, but one of the greatest rap albums ever made, let alone in this past decade. This might be my most sacrilegious Tribe take, but I think this is easily their best produced album. Obviously, Low End Theory, Midnight Marauders, fantastic, super catchy and jazzy and fun, but We Got It From Here is just so spellbinding in a way that almost defies description for me. Like how they take their influences and combine them with these modern aesthetics and even those little hints of rock as we get further in, just absolutely beautiful and at moments even surreal. I find as we go on, I'm running out of ways to describe just how great Q-Tip is, but maybe that's the best description you can give him because at this point, what can you say about Q that has not already been said? The charisma, the flow, the inflection, everything about him. If he's not at least in your top 15, you are on crack cocaine, and I suggest you get off it.
Agreed. He's in my top 5, actually.
Yep.
I think he's officially top 10 for me after diving back in.
Fucking based.
And of course, we've said it numerous times throughout this, but it cannot be said enough. Rest in peace, Fife Dog. Going back to this again, I think made me realize that he's not just a really good rapper. No, he is right up there with Q and all the other greats. Just absolute monster, even in his final days. And to echo what Mick was saying earlier, Jerobi White is every bit their equal on this project. Like, holy shit, who told him to go in there and do this after not touching a mic for 20 years? Where
Man.
was this?
This was literally in the vault, surely. Like, fucking hell. He absolutely went off on Thank You For Your Service. Oh my god.
Like, Jesus Christ. It makes me wonder if, had he not gone on to pursue his culinary career, and I hope he's happy. I'm not saying he shouldn't have, but I'm just saying, had he not, how much better would Midnight Marauders, Low End Theory, even Beats, Rhymes, and Life and Love Movement, how much better would they be if he was bringing that?
We could only
Something to
imagine
think
now.
about. Yeah. Another thing I think this project is best at compared to the rest of their project is it's easily their best feature list. Anderson
Yes.
Paak's Anderson Paak's verse on moving along, or not moving along, moving backwards. Pardon me. Beautiful in only the way Pac can provide. Kendrick sounds absolutely nuts on Conrad Tokyo. Gives us a nice little tease of what he'd be doing on Damn. Jack White's guitar playing, obviously impeccable. Andre on Kids is wild as hell. Consequence really steps it up in comparison to Beats, Rhymes, and Life. And of course, I think you cannot talk about this project without talking about the one and only Busta Rhymes, who absolutely loses his mind every single time he's here. Desperately need to listen to that man's solo stuff, because if it's anywhere near as good as what he's bringing here, good Lord Almighty.
Surely you know the song Woo-Ha Got You All in Check, right?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, that the one with ODB, that is one of the fucking wackiest hip hop songs ever, and it's amazing.
I've probably heard it before, but I'd have to hear it again to be sure.
Oh yeah.
Oh, also, I can't believe I almost forgot this. Talib and Kanye on Killing Season.
Yes.
Another weird fun fact that came out in the wake of this album, I learned leading up to this, by the way. According to Consequence, apparently Kanye was supposed to be added as an honorary member of Tribe for this album, but that ended up not happening.
I remember that, actually. Imagine if he actually fucking joined a Tribe Called Quest.
That would have been fucking bizarre.
It would be the most bizarre thing to ever happen in hip hop. Like, what the fuck?
Can you get any more opposite people than Kanye West and Q-Tip?
I don't know what that would have sounded like, but it would have been interesting.
Tribe on Yeezus beats, let's hear it.
No.
That'd be perfect.
God. But, yeah, I mean, absolutely masterful project, and the only bad thing I can say is that I just wish it wasn't their last.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, and with that in mind, my favorite tracks on the Low End Theory are Bugging Out, Show Business, and Jazz We've Got. That beat on Jazz We've Got is fucking amazing. And no least favorite tracks, Not a Chance in Hell.
My favorite tracks are Jazz We've Got, Scenario, and my favorite A Tribe Called Quest song, Excursions. I do not have a least favorite track.
I forgot to mention Show Business is my favorite Tribe Called Quest track.
Nice. Good picks all around. My favorite tracks when we got it from here, and there's a few of them. Narrowing this down was really, really hard. The Space Program, We the People, Black Spasmodic, Moving Backwards, The Donald, and my favorite A Tribe Called Quest song, Disgeneration. And for least favorites in my notes, I just wrote Hell No. So, yeah.
I should have done the same. And, yeah, that's it. That's our Tribe Called Quest ranking.
We did it.
Hell yeah. I can't think of your username. Thank you so much for coming on.
You.
That was great.
Thank you guys very much for having me. Super grateful. My first real experience with podcasting. It was a lot of fun. I'd love to be back. Love to be back one of these days.
For sure.
And
absolutely.
Yeah. Looking forward to whatever y'all have cooking next.
Sick. You've always been a great fucking friend to the channel, so thank you very much for that as well.
Appreciate you, man.
Big
Both of you.
And yeah, with that in mind, thank you guys so much for checking out today's episode of the Taped Podcast. We really hope that you enjoyed. Special shout outs to our patrons, Slugbait, aka Aubrey, Joshua, and Koner1. Thank you so much for your patronage. Of course, necessary links to that Patreon will be in the description as well as our Discord server where you could possibly chat with us, with yours truly. What else is there? Be sure to check out some previous episodes of the Taped Podcast. Check out some of the live streams that we do as well. We have a lot of fun there. And necessary links to our own channels that we barely upload on will be there too, I guess. And yeah, with that in mind, my name has been MickyT.
I've been Nostalgia.
And I can't think of a username.
See ya!
Peace
Bye-bye.
and love.